You're on the road beyond. I'm Todd Duplantis. Thanks for joining us Facebook Live. By the way, you're watching us on Facebook Live. We also have a YouTube channel. You can watch all of our shows on our YouTube channel. Find us on YouTube as the Road Beyond Podcast. Go on over, subscribe to the channel, and you'll get notifications when we post these shows. Ike McFadden's my co-host, joining me from Tennessee as always. Good evening to you, Ike.
Thanks for telling everyone where to find me. I'll expect the death threats any day now.
Well, we'll post your address in the comments section below this post here, so I'll do that later.
Yeah, how are you doing?
Okay, all right, good deal. So, Ike, do you have a good week?
Actually, I did. I mean, the weather up here, as I said, has been nice. And when is the new UFO report supposed to be coming out? Isn't that like within a week or so?
I think it's a couple weeks away, towards the end of this month. That's due. We'll have to get Pete Haviland, our producer, to check on that for us and get us an exact date. But I think it's coming up at the end of the month. One way or another, I know that's going to open up a whole new can of topics for you, because you'll just be looking to shoot everything down.
Well, if you want to make a bet, and we can bring Pete in here on this as well, I'm going to bet a whole lot of nothing.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, they're not going to say aliens in any shape or form, which I get it, because it's easier to assume these aerial phenomena, as they call them, are UAPs is what they're calling them now. That they are terrestrial as opposed to extraterrestrial. So that's what we should get, a whole bunch of nothing.
Well, so are you staking out the claim that no matter what they say, it will prove aliens?
I think I've been very clear with my thoughts on this, is that, yeah, it's easier to explain. I don't think these things are necessarily from outer space. They're from somewhere here on Earth. Whether it's in the same dimension that we're living in, that's another story. But I think it's easier to explain that they are terrestrial.
So, okay, are you declining my bet?
I'm going to decline your bet there. We're going to have to see. We'll see what happens when the report comes out. We'll certainly report on that. But hey, tonight we've got a great show for you. A few years back, Ike, when this show was first launched, it was a TV pilot, and we actually went down to Galveston, filmed the first TV pilot. It was around 2004, 2005, around that time. And one of the things we did is we investigated this old building, and we did some recordings inside the old building as part of the show. And we recorded some voices that you didn't necessarily hear, but you picked them up on tape. They're called EVPs, or electronic voice phenomena. And we've got an expert who will talk about that tonight. And I'm very excited about this, Ike. You know the ghost boxes, right?
Yeah. Is that the same? Is that what records the EVP? Is that what it is?
Well, no, the EVPs are separate things. The ghost boxes, Well, we've got a guest who's going to talk about it. We've been talking about ghost boxes, it seems like, since this podcast started. Well, tonight is the night, Ike. We're talking about the ghost box. We've discussed this device extensively on the show. We tried to explain it, but tonight we're going to learn all about what the ghost box does. What is it? And we'll also hear some EVPs or some ghost box recordings, and we'll talk about EVP recordings.
Yeah, that's right. We've got Tim Woolworth. He's our guest tonight. Tim says he's always been interested in the paranormal, but that may have stemmed from having a very devout Christian mother. I can understand that. He first started investigating ghosts in 2000 when he did his first house cleansing. That's interesting. I'd like to hear about that. So while performing that act, he experienced enough activity to realize that paranormal activity was indeed real, and he could experience it firsthand.
Tim joined up with the Central New York Ghost Hunters in 2008 and first had a chance to work with a Shack Hack Ghost Box. We'll hear about that. He says 2 years later, he was picking up his first clear Ghost Box session recordings in Gettysburg, of all places. A month later, he launched ITC Voices website, which he operates today. Tim says he firmly believes he'll be educating people in paranormal topics for the rest of his life. Tim, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
We appreciate you being here. First off, what is ITC? And tell us about your website.
Oh, sure. ITC Voices is one of my two websites that's dedicated strictly to all forms of ITC. ITC, it stands for Instrumental Transcommunication. It's the use of any independent third-party device that to communicate with discarnate consciousness of an unknown origin. And these devices can both record and play back in some form the evidence that's been recorded for independent review. So I know that sounds like a whole word jargon thing, but think of EVP. Your listeners know what EVP is, I'm going to assume, where basically you're throwing down a recorder and you get an answer, a voice that wasn't in the room with you. That recorder that you put down is a third-party instrument. That's where the instrumental comes through. And that third party is recording and it can be reviewed by other people. It stands on its own, uninfluenced by a person.
So, okay, let me ask this. What a ghost box, is that a very specific kind of equipment, or is it a generic term? Or could you give us an example of, for someone like me who doesn't know that much about this topic, could you just give me the idiot's view of it?
Sure. A ghost box is basically, it's a device that allows you to talk to discarnate consciousness in real time. So you can pose a question, you can make an observation, and voices will intelligently interact with you through a speaker so you can hear it in real time and foment conversations between you and the other side. These devices, they come in various forms, but most of the time they're in a box-like form. Sometimes you can get them in apps, but physical boxes are what people have been using. And the ghost box was invented in 2002 by a man named Frank Sumption.
So is there a microphone inside, or what exactly is inside this box?
There is no microphone. Depending on the type of ghost box you have, the classic ones use a radio tuner, which random voltage is applied to. Basically, you can you mentioned a shack hack. Shack hacks are off-the-shelf radios that have been modified where the mute wire is cut. So when you hit scan, it goes all the way up and all the way down the band without dropping any channels. And while it's doing that, what happens is that you're bringing up all of that static, all of that white noise, and that helps to foster communication. Other boxes that are more developed better, they have ways to control how much voltage is going in there. So you can speed it up, you can slow it down, you can go linearly, you can jump between stations. There's a lot to it, but basically it's a broken radio that allows you to talk to the other side.
Tim, from what I've seen with ghost boxes, that looks like a large transistor radio, and more or less it cherry picks words as it's scanning the spectrum. That's the broadcast spectrum. Is that basically what it's doing? It's cherry picking words, and those words, okay, you're shaking your head no. How does it work? Because from what I'm hearing, sometimes the words make sense, sometimes they're just gibberish. Is that what happens?
Yes. So there's many different ways that the communication presents itself. Sometimes it is breakthrough communication, like you'll hear tonight in the clips that I sent you, where it is just pure communication, conversation level. On my site, ITC Voices, I actually classified all these different types of communication. I wrote most of the theory for Ghost Box that's out there today. And breakthrough is what we're always striving for, where I say hello and it says hello back. Then there are communications like you're referencing, where you'll hear a voice throughout the band where it'll say one word or three words and then skip a little and then another word and then skip a little and another word. And you piece all these same voices together and it's passed through 4 or 5 times and you get a full sentence communicating to you. Other ones, we get voices that come through that are etheric and they're very sing-songy, like you're in a church and it rides above everything. We get whispers coming through on the static. There's a lot to it.
Now,
Go ahead, Ike.
I've read a little bit about, there's this phenomenon, I forget what it's called, but it basically means I believe there are places you can go in the Pacific where you can still catch bouncing radio waves and transmissions from, say, the 1940s. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with that?
I've read about it briefly, and it has something to do with the magnetosphere around the Earth and it getting trapped basically with the magnetosphere, and what we have protects us against solar rays and reflects them. Sometimes terrestrial signals can get trapped in those rays and bounce back down and then just get bounced over and over and over. As to whether that's happening in Ghost Box, we have no idea.
Go ahead, Todd.
Tim, do you take the ghost box with you on an investigation, or do you communicate through the ghost box anywhere you are? Meaning, do you have to take it to like a haunted church or a haunted house? How does that work?
You can communicate anywhere. If you want to sit down in a Walmart parking lot, you can. There's this misnomer in the paranormal community that if you're communicating with an entity, let's say at Waverly Hills, the entity must be from Waverly Hills because you're in a haunted location. Not always. There's been research showing that we all have a contact field, and you could be bringing the ghost with you.
Right.
So
go ahead.
And I'm a bit of, sort of a skeptic on some of these things, but I mean, just to put this in clear terms, is it your sense that these are actual entities in the area that were once alive? Is this something from another dimension? Is it, if you had to take a guess, I know you don't know, but what do you think these things are?
Well, the spirit, sometimes I call them spirits. I like to call them discarnate consciousness, but they tell us that they're dead. From time to time, they'll say, we're dead. You will get things, and actually you're going to have some clips of this, of people who are not dead coming through a ghost box. You can get alien communication coming through a ghost box. The ghost box was actually invented to communicate with aliens, believe it or not spirits. To put it bluntly, we don't know who or what we're communicating with at any point in time. The only thing that we know is that the intelligence is communicating with us in an intelligent fashion and is trying to converse with us.
We're talking with Tim Woolworth. He runs a site called ITC Voices, and he's also a paranormal conference speaker. Tim does presentations on the Ghost Box. And Tim, you've sent us some recordings from the Ghost Box. So what do you say we go through a couple of those now? I've got two of them you said are connected. Maybe you can set this up as to when you recorded, where you were, and how long ago this was.
Yeah, so both of these clips, they represent something that is absolutely fascinating in the paranormal that no one is reaching out and trying to explore. They're both voices of people who are alive and well and known to me, and they came through a ghost box. The first one you're going to hear is Hi Tim, and it was a fellow investigator who was actually asleep 45 miles north of me when I recorded this clip. For posterity's sake, I had her record her voice directly afterwards so you can compare them. Wow. Now, if you run them through a spectrogram, the cool thing is the frequency points basically match up. And that is something really special we can talk about afterwards. The second one, you're going to hear a lady's voice coming through the radio. This was a Shack Hack. The first clip, Hi Tim, went through a Frank's box. On the Shack Hack, you're going to hear a voice come through, and then you're going to hear the woman whose voice came through the radio speak directly afterwards because she was sitting next to me listening to the radio at the same time.
Wow. Okay. All right. We're gonna play this first one here. And this one is 18 seconds long. I'm going to go back to the beginning, and this one, we'll listen to it, and then we'll have you tell us about it.
I have a request for somebody.
Hey, Tim. Hey, Tim. Hey, Tim.
I haven't.
So, Tim, you were saying the woman whose voice is on there saying, hey, Tim, she was not there with you. You're saying this was somebody who was not in the room?
No, she was a fellow paranormal investigator, and her voice is coming through a broken radio while she's asleep.
Is this the phenomena that I've read about where there are such things as ghosts of people who are living right now?
I don't think it's a ghost of somebody who's living. I think it's just a consciousness in a different state. If you look at the basics of quantum physics, time is relative to where your position is against the speed of light. And it's often been theorized that all moments in time are happening at the exact same time. So her consciousness is in multiple places at one point. For all I know, she is saying, hey, Tim, and at the same time as she was sleeping, she could be dead in the same existence at the same point in time, and she's coming through.
And so what we're hearing in that one, for example, we're actively hearing the radio scan across frequencies as you're hearing that hey Tim. So it's not any one particular frequency.
No, I have a request for somebody, and then her voice, hey Tim, pops up. This is on a little wooden box sitting on my lap, and I can't stress enough that she was asleep 45 miles north. And her voice, the voice of someone living, is coming through a paranormal object.
That's just crazy. Now that blows my mind right there. Okay, we're going to listen to this next one. And you said this is connected. This is about 6 seconds long. So
Yes.
Listen up. I'll play it twice.
Go back the way, something about help. The way on. Go back the way, something about help.
Okay, and is this the same investigator?
No, this is a different investigator. This was on an active investigation. We're sitting at a table. I've got the shack hack on the table in front of me. She is sitting directly to my right. I did not recognize it in real time, but then we went back, played the evidence, and all of a sudden I hear her voice through the radio in a way that's, it turns me on, is what she says through the radio. And then the same lady directly after that is commenting on what she thought she heard and says, go back the way, something about help. So she's commenting on her voice coming through the radio.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you, is there any kind of post-processing you do to clean these things up? Because I know
those are raw, absolutely raw.
Do you have to be an empath or maybe somebody who has psychic abilities to work the ghost box or to perform or pick up these recordings? Or is this something that's just plug and play, anybody can do?
It's been found that some people are better than others. There is no doubt about that. A great example, I was doing an event at a location. I was connecting people in the room with people who passed over who were family members on the other side. And I got really exhausted after about an hour and a half. A friend of mine was sitting right next to me. He's like, can I try that? I've always wanted to try it. And it goes from crystal clear communication, and I hand it to him and it just goes pure static.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I
Go ahead.
follow up on
Go
that?
ahead.
Do you, and is this stuff you buy off the shelf, or do you have to build this, or are there construction kits? And I mean, what is the state of the technology, and how, let's say there's someone out there who wants to get into this. Mm-hmm. As I said, do you buy it? Do you learn how to build it yourself? Do you have to have any kind of electronic expertise or audio expertise?
Yeah, you do. Some of the off-the-shelf radios that you can modify require a little bit of soldering, cutting and soldering. It's pretty easy. But to actually build one, there are people, the old school boxes that I have where it's all transistors and wires and everything, those boxes basically aren't made anymore. There's a handful of people who made them, and they've gone the way of the dodo. But there are a lot of people out there developing rapid boxes today where it's basically Arduino and a couple things plugged into Arduino. So it's a lot easier to put one together these days. You have a radio receiver and Arduino programming saying how it goes up and down the radio receiver. It runs into an amp, out to a speaker, and a way to control your voltage.
So I'm sorry, what is that? Arduino, you mentioned that? I don't know what that term is.
Arduino is it's kind of a hobby circuit that can be used for anything. It's all what the program you put into it. It's a digital circuit board, basically. And you upload your software into it, and it functions as you want. So if you want it to be an alarm or something that triggers lights or robotics or anything, Arduino does it all.
Okay.
And I noticed on your website, Tim, you do have a couple of diagrams for people to put these together. Or is that like a more or less a blueprint that you can actually build this yourself?
Oh yeah, those diagrams that I've got up there are blueprints taken from Frank Sumption directly.
Okay, so you can check out Tim's website, itcvoices.org, correct?
Correct, or .com will reroute you there.
Okay, this is the last Ghost Box recording, and this one runs 49 seconds long. This is a pen test. You want to set this up, Tim?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. This was back in 2010, and I was still doubting the phenomenon. And I really wanted to just get concrete call and response answers. So I had a Sharpie in my hand, and you can play it from there and see what the response is.
Okay, here it goes.
Please tell me what I've got in my hand. Hello? I have a pen in my hand. Do you see the pen? You see the pen? It is a sharp pen.
See.
You see it? What color is it? Black is right.
Yeah, you can hear him say black at the end. You hear him say sharp. Do you know who this voice was?
No idea. Not a clue.
What were your thoughts after recording that? Have there ever been any times where you recorded something you're like, wow, this one's got the hair on my back standing up there?
Well, this was one of those breakthrough moments for me, and it made me it reified the concept that the communication is very intelligent. Moreover, they can respond intelligently, they can see colors, and they can even read. All of this they can see our physical objects in our physical world. That's what this said.
So this is an area that I assume is reasonably new in terms of study. I assume you must have some kind of archive of these recordings, even if they're not yours, or is that wrong?
Myself, I've got a bunch of recordings on ITC Voices. I kind of gave up on ITC Voices a couple years ago, and I launched my new site because I figured I'd done everything that I needed to do with ghost boxes for the most part. So I leave it up as just a general reference. So I'm not really adding new recordings to it at this point in time.
Okay, but is there a circle of people out there that are continuing to study this? Is there a community?
Oh, absolutely. There are a bunch of people out there still. It's growing in leaps and bounds. When I got into it in 2008, there was a handful of us. There are thousands of people doing it today.
I know you mentioned that these recordings are raw that you play for us, but I know with the EVPs, when we recorded them, we actually put them through some programs where we could isolate sounds. Is that a common practice with EVPs? Are they a little bit harder to define or to hear the sounds?
Well, with EVP, there are a lot of people who put out processed EVP, and I have always kind of been against that. I think that, if you're an investigator and you're trying to research, you should be presenting something that people will encounter, and so they'll know what it sounds like raw on a recording. Now, what I've done before with EVP is I'll take the raw recording, label it as raw, and then put the processed version directly afterwards so people can hear the difference between the two.
Do Ouija boards play into any of this? Is this like the new form of Ouija boards? And are you ever worried that you're inviting something in that you don't want to deal with in the future when you're opening up the ghost box?
Well, I've been doing this for 13 years now, and I haven't had to have an exorcism, so I'm doing pretty good. The Ouija board, yeah, it's kind of like a digital Ouija board. I guess you could say that. It's a lot faster. And there's actually a guy, Mike Robins out of the UK, who actually built a box using a Ouija board.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Tim, where can people find you on the web? itcvoices.org, one site, but you say you've got a new site as well, which has recordings on it.
It doesn't really have a lot of recordings. It's mainly article-based. It's for education. It's called paranormalstudy.com, and it encompasses all things paranormal.
And you have a blog on that site as well?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, we put it up a couple years ago. We've got a couple hundred articles on there. We've got a census for people to put in their paranormal experiences for other people to read. There's all kinds of stuff going on there.
Tim, we appreciate you joining us tonight. Some fascinating recordings, and we've finally been able to catch up to speed on the Ghost Box, which we've been talking about since day one on the show. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you for the invitation. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Tim Woolworth will have the links in the social media posts for the show to his websites. Ike, some fascinating things, but for a skeptic yourself, I imagine you got a little bit of interest out of some of that.
Yeah, well, actually, it was. I wanted, to be honest, I mean, I think you were the first person I had heard about this from, the whole ghost box thing, which doesn't mean anything. What do you make of that?
Well, I had it all wrong. What I was thinking a ghost box, from what it was explained to me, is the ghost box was more or less cherry picking words that were already out there in the broadcast spectrum and giving them to you. what I'm finding fascinating out of this, which I can't find an answer for, is having people that are creating full sentences that are nowhere in the room, in another location, not even aware of what's going on here. That's what's fascinating to me. And I think since day one on the show, I've always said, we're going to explore a lot of topics. And some of those things, we don't have a logical explanation for, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, this isn't totally related, but it was something I was thinking of when he was talking, it reminded me, do you remember there was a book that came out, and this has got to be 10 or 15 years ago, called The Bible Code? And it was talking about how you take these various words in sentences and you can pull them together, and there's an entirely different message or meaning in there. And I was thinking, gosh, that's almost sort of like this old analog paper-based version of something. Maybe this phenomenon is something that just goes around and remanifests in different kinds of technologies at different eras.
It could very well be. And I mean, this seems like the modern day version of the Ouija board. We all remember back when we were kids. I know when you probably used one. I know when I was a kid, you'd get the candles going and you'd sit there and are you moving the thing? No, I'm not moving it. You moving it. Next thing you know, it's spelling out, dead grandma or something like that. It was just wild. It was creepy, but it was fascinating at the time. But what is different about this and what Tim was telling us is I've always heard that you don't want to mess with Ouija boards. We've had some psychics on the show and some people that'll tell you, don't mess with Ouija boards because you don't know what you're opening up. With this, though, it sounds like it's a whole different realm. Yeah, it's a Ouija board and maybe a modern day one, but you aren't inviting in the evil things that you could be opening up with a Ouija board.
Well, I'll tell you the other thing that came to mind when he was speaking, and also just now when you're talking about Ouija boards, was there's this concept that goes back, I think, for quite a long time in the occult, of not necessarily knowing what spirit you're talking to. And that, you may be trying to summon something, and then there's this worry that it's actually something else disguised as something.
Yeah.
You see that in exorcisms a fair amount, about these voices that claim to be something, and you have to work to really find out exactly what their real name is. Anyway, it's interesting. It sort of overlaps a lot of this.
And next thing you know, you got an entity you're raising in your house, feeding, clothing, and
paying for college.
They're paying for college. Paying for college for Beelzebub, is very costly these days.
Anyway,
all right.
Tell us about the stories.
Yeah, we've got here's a look at some of the weird, tantalizing, and just plain bizarre stories posted from our partners at the Full Spectrum Project on Facebook. Ike, do you have something up first?
No, I wanted to hear your stuff first.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's just me tonight. All right. This story, Ike, via the Full Spectrum Project, but it actually was posted originally by author Troy Taylor, which if you're on Facebook, make sure you check out Troy Taylor. He posts some very interesting stuff. Are you familiar with the game Silent Hill? I know you're a gamer. You were in the gaming industry for a while as a developer. Are you familiar with Silent Hill?
I am. I think it's a great sort of artistically weird game. And they even made a movie, I believe, that was also really interesting.
Yeah, it was a survival game based on a Japanese horror media franchise. First debuted in 1999, later launched a very successful series. It was set in a fictional American town, but the real inspiration, Ike, has been found. On May 27, 1962, firefighters in a small Pennsylvania town of Centralia began their annual burn day at the local dump, only to accidentally ignite an underground coal deposit beneath the town that continues to burn today. Now, the town has been almost completely abandoned, overtaken by nature, and has become a chilling inspiration for the game and film Silent Hill. The town was never large to begin with, but it was once a busy industrial place. And at its peak, it had about 2,700 people living there. But today, the population of the town's cemeteries far outnumber the living residents, Ike. The events that led to the town's demise, slowly diminishing its population from its peak numbers, less to a dozen. That's how many people are living there. It all began in 1962 when that fire started below the town. It was the burning of excess trash was a very common practice, but no one guessed that an exposed vein of anthracite coal lay beneath the town. That's what caught on fire. That's what happened. The flames were extinguished, Ike, but the smoke lasted for years. And eventually the town was abandoned. Apparently, Ike, here's the crazy part about it. Numerous attempts were made to put out the fire, but all of them failed. The mines were flushed with water and the burning coal was excavated. But despite those efforts, apparently some kid died in 1981. There were sinkholes, and faced with no lack of answers, they were apparently Pennsylvania spent more than $42 million in government funds to get the folks out of there for safety reasons. And there is believed to be enough coal remaining in the 8 Mile vein to continue burning for as long as 250 years. So if you wondered about the Silent Hill video game, this is the real inspiration, Centralia, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I actually did know a bit about Centralia. It's a very interesting topic, this idea of a however many years fire that's gone on. And there's some, as I recall, there's some interesting photos, and Pete probably knows this better than I do. Aren't there some photos online of sort of various parts of the town where you've got roads that go up to a tunnel that's been sealed off, and little parts of the town that...
We've been showing a few photos while we were doing this story. We found a few of them. But yeah, there are photos out there. And, you know, it's interesting though. I mean, I guess you're talking 1962. The firefighters of all people are the ones who were blamed for starting a fire that could burn for another 250 years.
Well, you know, the other scary thing is, if you think about it, I mean, it's less than ideal to have a coal mine burning for all these years. But gosh, can you imagine some situation where we had some kind of nuclear reactor that was melting down for 400 years or something like that? So it's interesting, these unintended consequences we can have with, I guess, you know, something that was ideally a good idea at the time.
It sounded like a good idea, but we'll check back with them in a couple of centuries and see how it's going there. All right, Centralia, Pennsylvania, put that on your bucket list, Ike. I guess that pretty much wraps up this week's show. You got anything planned for next week?
Gosh, well, I was going to there's a local coal mine here. I am in Tennessee, and I just have an idea. I'm not going to tell you what it is.
You got some trash to burn?
Let's just check back next week.
All right, we'll check back with you. Hey, folks, as we mentioned at the top of the show, you're watching us on Facebook Live. You can also follow us on Twitter at Road_Beyond. The Road Beyond podcast. You can find us on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Ike, you know, our shows are free right now, but sooner or later, they may not be.
Oh, we're going to have to pay to do this?
Yeah, we're going to have to pay, so sooner or later. But you can watch all of our content for free on our YouTube channel. Check us out at the Road Beyond podcast. Ike, thanks for being here. Hopefully we'll see you again next week. I think Pete will line us up some more guests.
Well, we'll see how my experiment goes with the... Yeah,
let us know how you burn out Sewanee. Let us know how that goes there. All right, thanks for being here, folks. You can watch this show on YouTube in the future, but right now you're on Facebook Live. I'm Todd Duplantis. He's Ike McFadden. We'll see you next time in the Road Beyond.